The starting point for our cohesion is based around our relationships, not only between coaches, but coaches and players and players and players. So we put a high priority on building really strong relationships, which allows the team to gel together and build some really good glue. And our group's had some unique experiences that they've gone through, which has really helped with that cohesion, because they've shared some things which other teams haven't had to go through. So they've built off that, and that cohesion's strong, and we're trying to get it stronger now. We spend a fair bit of time, in meetings with guys, and there's a lot of coffees, catching up with guys for breakfast, and having get players around to my house for dinners and things like that, just to get to know them away from football, understand what makes them tick, understand what is actually after out of their career as a footballer as well. So trying to engage them on a different level than just purely coach player. It's more to understand who they are and really what they stand for. Well, I think it helps them understand where you're coming from, and you get a reflection or an understanding of where they're coming from and what they're after. If a player comes to me and says, I want to be one of the best midfielders in the competition, that's a pretty clear goal they have. Then all I'll do is hold them accountable to the behaviours required to do that. So they're the conversations you have with players, and that allows you to, on the training track, for them to maintain a high standard, and for you to drive that standard that they want to achieve. They all come from different backgrounds and come with slightly different reasons, and clearly our game's unique in that we play a 22-man game, and therefore it's not like you can have one or two superstars that can get it done for you on the weekend. You've got to rely on everyone, and we're certainly a very even contribution sort of weighted numbers type of side, and the individuals come in with their own personal goals, and that's part of sport and part of people being involved in sport, but ultimately we need them to commit to what is the team goals, and sometimes that's as simple for players to play their role and do what they're expected to do, not necessarily put themselves above the team, because, as I said, our sport doesn't allow people, a star to carry a side over the line. It just doesn't happen that way. So we're pretty strong, and that's certainly one of our key drivers and behaviours that we value is a team first approach. Our sport's also unique in that it's one of those sports where, as well as you might want to play or you can play, you'll play as well as the team plays in a lot of cases. And so it's a unique game in that you can find that just by playing your role will actually help you be a better player, because of the fact that the team will perform better. So the two are intertwined. The challenge from a coaching viewpoint is to get the player to understand clearly what his role is within the team, and then to execute that as well as possible. And when you do that and you get multiple players doing that, you find the team gets into some synchronisation and can play some really good football. There's two sides of our program that we run. One's the mechanics side, which is basically how we play, how we go about playing, the skills we develop, the player from a footballing viewpoint. The other side is the dynamics, which is the emotional side and the relationship side. So how we actually build that and understand their emotional intelligence, and understand how we can actually engage them in that space, because they're all different. That's the other beauty. We've got 45 young men on our list who are some are 17 and just starting out their journey. Others are over 30 and getting towards the end, but they all come with their own unique set of circumstances, their own different family units. So trying to understand that emotional side from the playing viewpoint allows them to actually, for their stage of maturity and their stage of development as a player, allows them to grow and continue to get better. Well, when we first acquire a player, it's probably about them understanding our program, understanding how we go about developing them as a player and developing our team. Clearly articulating what we think their role will be within the team, and then it's probably for the younger guys, because we're bringing guys fresh out of almost school. Introducing them into professional football for a lot of guys is a big step. So when it comes down to educating them about their diet, educating them about strength and conditioning, educating them about our game plan, educating them about what it actually takes to be a professional footballer, not only when they're at the footy club, but away in their life, in terms of what they eat, their sleep patterns, all those things, is a fair chunk of information, and you've probably got to drip feed it into them. So it's not a matter of here's a full frontal lobotomy, just shove it in. It's more like, okay, let's start to actually educate you now what it's going to be for you to be a 10-year professional footballer. Very much so. I mean, that's the thing we pride ourselves on, is to be able to go that shouldn't matter who you're talking to in our coaching organisation or our high performance, the messaging should be the same. And we want to think that amplification sort of comes through, so the player's getting a consistent message and they're really clear in terms of what's expected of them as a player at our footy club. During the season, we certainly meet probably, if not once, 2-3 times a week, whether it be a review of a game and then planning for the next games, and then obviously selection takes some time as well. So there's ongoing meetings, and when it comes to style of play, it might be a one-on-one meeting I have with a coach around what might be happening with the forward line or what's happening with our midfield setups. It might be something to do with our team defence, with our team defence coach. So yeah, those meetings can be informal, they can be formal. And certainly between myself and the high performance staff, we speak daily as to how the group's travelling, from an energy level, from a recovery viewpoint, how we're tracking in terms of our numbers from a training volume, to make sure that we give our players the best chance to be as right as possible for the weekend. One thing we've done and we need to probably do and continue to do better is to just check in on each other and find how we're going as well. Is the unique nature of sport at this level is it's high stakes and therefore can be high pressure, and it's important that we make sure we keep each other healthy both on the inside and outside, so that we're capable of doing our jobs to the best of our ability. It probably depends a little bit on what the issue is. If it's a breach of our policy or our team ethos or whatever else, well, that's probably a discussion I'll have with the leadership group around how do we discipline or deal with the issue. If it's something which is outside of that, which might be something to do with, say, mental health, then there's obviously we've got professionals we can employ and engage that can help out the player in that space. So it really does depend on what the issue is, and probably that's the importance of the relationships, is to actually be really clear with the player as to what's caused this action, or what's causing the problem, and how can we actually help you overcome it. And probably the first thing in that is if it's an error that the player's made, I'm pretty strong on the player basically owning that, and it's taking his accountability and responsibility for his actions, and then we work from there as to how we can change his behaviour and/or discipline if required. This year we had six players on the leadership group. Now it's not a fixed number of six. It's really dependent upon how the players see the leaders at the footy club and the guys that they want to entrust with those roles. This year the number was 6. Next year I don't know. And it's done through a series of pretty much they have a trademark, the players, and they vote on who they think basically espouses the virtues of the trademark the best and lives the trademark the best. And then from there they select their leadership group, and there's some input from the coaches in that space, but generally you find when those exercises are run, there's a clear cut-off in terms of the guys who have the numbers to be in the leadership group and those who are just outside it. We've done that pretty much at the end of the pre-season phase before we actually start playing pre-season practice matches. So it allows the players enough time to see their peers operate through not only the previous season but also through the pre-season area, to see the guys who are genuinely living that trademark, and then they can vote from there. So it's really what the players stand for. It's as simple as that. A set of values and behaviours that the players want to stand for, and they measure themselves against that. We have one for the coaches as well, so we understand what our responsibility is within our team environment, and again we're held to account with that, not only from our coaches but also the players will give us feedback on our trademark. Being on the earth as long as I have been, you sort of end up with a whole range of life experiences, and that shapes the person you are, as well as obviously your nature, which is you're sort of born with. So I think I look at it and say, well, I've been fortunate in my time to be part of some successful football clubs, and it allows you to bring some level of experience and hopefully some confidence to the players that this is a mountain that we can climb. In terms of building those relationships, I think it's just a matter of who you are and being the person you are, and they've got to be genuine, because you can't fake a relationship with someone. And the reality is there'll be certain players on the list that I'll get on better than with other players, just because that's the nature of 50 people. If we had 55, you get 45 players and 10 coaches, there'll be different relationships between each player and coach, just depending on their personality. So it's not something you force, and it's, as I said, those relationships are different, but it's got to be based on some pretty open and honest conversations with people. And some conversations and relationships with guys can last 2 minutes, others can last 20 minutes. That's just the nature of people. The connectivity of the group you can recognise, and that's one of the great, interesting parts of our game in particular, is because it is a 22-man game. You've got this unique web of relationships that bind everyone together, and that's something which doesn't happen overnight. And it's a unique trait which I think the most successful teams really possess, is this ability to be connected and stay connected through the good and the bad that happens on game day. I think it's probably a combination of whether it shapes your position or whether you've sort of custom fit to a position. I think that's, for us, it's probably more or less about a position. It's more about a role, and we've got some guys who, have got different personalities who play both forward, back, and midfield. So it's probably hard to say in our game because it's, say with the 22 out there, it's a wider blend of different personalities and people types. Yeah, well, that's something that I've been. Thanks for bringing that up. Something I've been sort of pondering over the last month since the last game, and there's some thoughts in there which clearly we did a lot right last year as a side and as a club. We made some progress going from the year before. We got knocked out in the second week of the finals to making it through to a grand final. Unfortunately, we didn't get the result we wanted on the last day, but there was still a lot of improvement we made, and clearly we understand now we've got some more to make, and that's part of the beauty of sport at this level, is you dust off and you get ready to go again. Well, that's part of what we'll do when we get back on the training track in about 4 weeks. Will be, we'll review the game. We'll discuss what actually transpired during the game. We'll assess whether things that we didn't do on that day, whether they were systematic in terms of the style of play, which I don't think to be the case. It's probably a matter of breaking that down, and then we get to training. I mean, the only way to really change behaviour is through training, and the training, whether it be on the track, whether it be in the gym, whether it be in running, is the way we'll change that behaviour and give ourselves the best chance of getting back there next year. I think what we're seeing in the AFL industry is probably more of a lean towards the mental space, and the mental space around performance and how it impacts performance. So, certainly I know there's a lot of clubs out there at the moment are looking at that space, and that's one area which I think we'll continue to get some gains in the, maybe in skill development, in conditioning, in strength. But I think the mental space is an area where we can probably get more substantial gains. I think it's a combination of both. It's probably the individual owning their own mental space in terms of what can happen. It's the nature of all sports. Is that you can, as a tennis player, you could come out and lose the first set, and all of a sudden, what is your self-talk? Where are you at in losing the first set? Now, if you're Roger Federer, maybe you're going, well, that happens. I'll move on. I'll go. I'll get the next set back. It's probably the importance of each individual. As I said, with our connectivity, if each individual can reset themselves to a point where they can continue to perform at a really high level or get back to performing at a high level, and if more guys can do that, then that glue will start to come back together. We don't have a psychologist as such. We've got access to psychologists, so some of the players will, there's a panel of guys guys and women that they can use to assist in that space, and we've got some sort of mental development programs in place within the club. I've got a fairly short career as a coach, only 2 years in, so I'm still learning, always learning.